Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're going to be diving into something super fascinating, the actual academic framework behind what makes a personality normal versus abnormal. We aren't just unpacking some dense psychological textbook today, we are literally unlocking the psychological blueprint of human behavior. I mean, think about it. Normal is a word we just throw around every single day, right? We say the weather's normal, the morning commute was normal, or, that someone is acting perfectly normal. But when it comes to the human mind and personality, what exactly makes someone normal? Is it just a statistical average? Is it strictly conforming to society? Or is there like a deeper structural blueprint going on? Well, today we're going to challenge how you normally use that word and see what psychology actually establishes as the baseline of human behavior. Okay, let's dive into this. Historically, psychology has always had a really tough time pinning down what normal actually means, mainly because human nature is just so incredibly subjective. But foundational texts, especially building on the works of big names like Maslow and Middleman, cracked this. They did it by shifting the focus away from being average to being functional. So, normal behavior is essentially defined as living a life in harmony with yourself and the world around you. It's the ability of a healthy, complete person to face frustrating or even dangerous situations and actually overcome them. It's really all about systemic resilience and balance. So here is our roadmap for today's journey. 1. Defining the healthy baseline. 2. Traits of normal personality. 3. Understanding abnormal behavior. 4. Markers of abnormal personality. And finally, 5. The personality spectrum. Section 1. Defining the healthy baseline. Let's start by setting up that healthy baseline. Now, keep in mind being normal absolutely does not mean being perfect. It doesn't mean you never have a bad day or you never feel down. Instead, it's about having a functional, practical toolkit for dealing with life. The source text we're looking at systematically categorizes this behavior. We're taking these literal, dense academic criteria today and breaking them down so you can clearly see the exact framework psychologists use to evaluate human personality. Section 2, Traits of Normal Personality. All right, let's move into the specific traits that our source material identifies as the literal building blocks of a normal personality. Our text outlines the 7 criteria of normalcy. And fun fact here, early psychologists spent decades fiercely debating this, just struggling to agree on a unified list of healthy traits before they finally settled on this consensus model. These aren't just isolated items on a checklist. They act more like an interlocking ecosystem that builds a balanced human mind. They range from setting realistic life goals based on your actual abilities, all the way to having a stable integration of your personality, which basically means your core drives and morals are deeply consistent. Now, an individual doesn't necessarily need to perfectly exhibit every single one of these 7 traits 24/7 to be considered normal. But a healthy person's behavior usually aligns with the vast majority of them, and that's what allows them to adapt and live in harmony with society. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the absolute most critical traits: efficient contact with reality. This is pretty much the definitive dividing line between a healthy and an unhealthy mind. A normal person builds relationships and makes decisions based on the actual physical and social world right in front of them. Their thoughts are planted firmly on the firm ground of reality, not in some fabricated, wishful, or completely distorted version of events. Another truly fascinating pillar here is adequate emotionality. Now notice that word adequate. A normal personality really requires emotional balance. It's kind of like the thermostat in a house, right? If it's stuck on 0 and there's a total lack of emotion, the pipes freeze. But if it's stuck on high and your expressions are wildly excessive for whatever is happening, the house catches fire. Normalcy is having a working thermostat. It adjusts appropriately to the temperature of the room. Section 3. Understanding abnormal behavior. Now we're going to shift our tone just a bit as we look objectively and empathetically at what happens when behavior deviates from that healthy baseline, and that functional toolkit we just talked about completely breaks down. The source text defines abnormal behavior as actions that are fundamentally contrary to the common good. It represents a total break from that harmony we were discussing earlier. This kind of behavior consistently violates accepted societal rules and norms, and it often surfaces outwardly as rude, arrogant, or distinctly antisocial actions. Section 4. Markers of abnormal personality. Just like we had those 7 building blocks for a normal personality, psychologists use specific markers to identify when a personality has become abnormal or disorganized. Our text actually highlights 12 distinct criteria. We can group the first 6 of these under social and emotional disruptions. Basically, these markers severely affect how a person relates to other people and how they manage their own feelings safely. So you'll see antisocial behaviors that just outright violate community norms. You'll see poor adjustment, where someone simply cannot adapt to different social situations, which leads to this really profound isolation and maladjustment. They suffer from deep feelings of insecurity, constantly looking at everyone around them with suspicion. And emotionally, they show immaturity, extreme tension, and hypersensitivity. They might even find themselves laughing or crying for absolutely no apparent reason, just completely unable to regulate their impulses. And it's absolutely crucial to remember here, these aren't just bad habits. This is a systemic failure to process the outside world. Then we have the remaining 6 criteria, which represent what we can call cognitive and internal disruptions. This is, at its core, a broken moral and cognitive compass. There's a really deep mental imbalance where thoughts become totally contradictory and inconsistent. There's a severe lack of insight, meaning the person literally doesn't have the knowledge of true from false or moral from immoral. When that internal compass breaks, true north just doesn't exist for them anymore. Because of that, they show absolutely no feeling of remorse for doing something wrong. They just keep repeating the same actions. And deep down, they suffer from a crippling lack of self-esteem and a completely improper evaluation of themselves. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how our academic text heavily emphasizes this concept of a disorganized personality. When those internal disruptions take over, the personality loses its overarching organization. There is zero coherence in their thoughts or their emotions. And the result? The behavior becomes so erratic and so unbalanced that it is practically impossible for an outside observer to make any logical sense of it. When we view these traits side by side on the personality spectrum, the contrast is honestly stark. Just take the trait of security, for example. On the normal side, an individual feels adequately secure under everyday circumstances. But on the abnormal side, that baseline of security is totally replaced by a persistent, pervasive fear. They feel fundamentally unaccepted by society, they look at people with deep suspicion, and they can never express their thoughts freely because they are literally anchored in insecurity. We see another massive contrast when we look at insight. A normal personality takes the experiences of the past, whether they were beneficial or really sad, evaluates them, and actively changes future behavior so they don't repeat the same mistakes. That is learning. The abnormal personality, though, exhibits a profound lack of insight. They don't even recognize when an action is wrong, they don't feel remorse, and they just blindly repeat harmful acts without a second thought or concern about the consequences. Section 5. The Personality Spectrum. And that brings us to our final synthesis. By contrasting these behaviors side by side, we can synthesize exactly what it takes to maintain psychological harmony. The whole thing is captured perfectly in this direct quote from the text. The individual suffering from abnormal behavior cannot evaluate the nature of the self. He behaves without understanding own strengths and limitations. It's really emphasizing that when an individual can't choose a path that actually matches their true capabilities, they end up chronically frustrated, feeling inferior, and fundamentally misadjusted. Which leaves us with this vital takeaway. Adequate self-evaluation is the ultimate anchor of normalcy. It's not just about feeling good about yourself, It's a critical, essential measure of your connection to reality. A healthy personality absolutely demands a realistic, integrated assessment of what you can do, what you cannot do, and exactly how you fit into the giant, complex world around you. Grasping this academic framework gives us just an incredible lens to view human behavior through, both in the people around us and in ourselves. As we've seen, living in harmony really requires realistic goals, emotional balance, and above all else, honest self-insight. So, I'll leave you with this to reflect on. How accurately are you evaluating your own strengths and limitations today? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep learning.